Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 3rd Board of Education meeting for the Marlboro Central School District. If you would stand with me and join in for the pledge. Right there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we get started, I want to thank our elementary school administration for hosting our board meeting tonight in this beautiful facility. Thank you both very much. With that, I'd like to start by getting into the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. This evening, I will be presenting an overview of where we are with the expenditures as well as planning for revisions for the federal stimulus funding that school districts have received over the past few years as part of the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'll keep my comments pretty brief at this point, but I just wanted to preface it all by part of the process with this federal funding is also to provide opportunities for stakeholder input. And I'm confident that that has taken place throughout this process, but now we're coming up on a time where we will be looking to make some revisions and adjustments. So we will be providing a few opportunities for really all involved to best understand what is involved with the federal funding, what have those funds been used for, and what we're looking to offer as far as proposed revisions. So tonight's presentation is really one of a three-part series. What I'll be looking to do tonight is just provide an overview to make sure that we're all aware and educated of the different funding opportunities that exist, the approximate of value or amounts that have been allocated and used. I'll use the term liquidated. And then we will have a subsequent presentation at our next board meeting about some of the proposed revisions and the why we're looking to make such revisions. The third meeting, which brings us into mid-December, we are looking to have our brand new District Continuous Improvement Committee presentations, and that will tie in to this federal funding because these funds will allow us to provide some of those opportunities that our group that actually met yesterday, and it was a great meeting. It was a full day, literally from beginning to end. We had over 20 of our faculty, staff, administrators. We also had parents involved in this process, and we really looked at what's great about Marlboro School District, and then what are some things that we could put in place, into action, that will take it to the next level. And that's really the concept, is sustained continuous improvement. So I'm not sure how the committee felt at the end of the day other than exhausted, but I know how I felt and really liking the direction that things will go. And I'm really excited when we get to present these action plans to the board, because that's one of the things that was stressed yesterday, is that we're not just having dialogue, we're creating action plans that will be implemented. So again, sorry I went off on a tangent there, but I thought that was important to preface the brief presentation that I'll go through in a few moments. I will conclude with wishing our drama team at the high school best wishes on their performances. They believe they're actually performing at this very moment at the high school auditorium. Another performance tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. and another performance on Saturday evening. So I'm certainly looking at also at 7 p.m. So I'm looking forward to seeing our student performers actually performing. So very exciting. And I don't want to steal too much from our friend Brett. Perhaps I already am, but I'll keep this part brief. I just want to wish our swimming and divers the best of luck in the Section 9 championship that's going on tonight and Saturday. And there's a big football game tomorrow night, Marlboro versus Port Jervis in the sectional tournament. I'm pretty excited about that. So good luck to our football team. Go Dukes. And I'm sure I have one last item that Brett probably doesn't have in his report, and that is wishing Faith a happy birthday. I understand her birthday was yesterday, so happy birthday to Faith.
Okay, do we have an Ulster BOCES report?
We do not. The first meeting is in 2 weeks, and we won't be there because it's the night of our board meeting.
Okay. And then I imagine the same goes for the Orange Ulster BOCES? Do we have? Joanne?
I will probably start next month.
All right. So now let's bring Mr. Brett Belcastro with the student rep report.
Good evening, everyone. The elementary school just wrapped up Ribbon Week. They welcomed Mr. Robertson's wildlife lecture to the K-5 school. The students were fascinated by all the animals and wildlife they got to saw, and that was sponsored by the PTA, so thank you very much. On the 31st, students got to wear their costumes because it's Halloween. They all looked the best in their costumes, and they had a blast, so thank you. Also, they have their turkey tot, and it's organized by Jenny's Gardens and the ASPCA to participate. Thank you so much. And now for the middle school, we are finishing up Spirit Week. Kids had a blast, lots of participation this year. And then last Friday, they had a Halloween dance, and it was 210 students attended that. So that was a big turnout, same as homecoming with that too. And then Monday, November 7th, is the middle school is hosting their 11th Power Up Night. It is a fun-filled event for educators, and it's a great way to bring the community together. They will have, the whole family's invited for a pizza party at 5:30, and then children will be provided with care so the teachers and parents can learn from educators. And then the 6th grade Frost Valley trip, I had an amazing time when I went. So these kids are going to have an amazing time when they go. It's an overnight trip for 6th graders. And they're going to have great team building activities with everything they're doing in the wilderness. And then for the high school, me and Celeste had a productive meeting with Mr. Lawler about the Student Voice Committee. And we're bringing that together. We're going to involve the president and vice president from 9, 10, 11, 12. And then we're also inviting the government club that they have at the high school, and we're looking for other students to be involved. So a lot of good things happening. Thank you.
Great job, Brett. It's nice to see you get into all 3 buildings and find out what's going on there. On another note, with the Power Up Night on Monday, there are various seminars that are given. I know one certain board member is giving something on writing a business plan and starting a successful business. I'm not mentioning any names, but if you'd like to come, I'd love to have you. I don't want to speak to an empty room, but please register, and I think you're going to find it to be a lot of fun. They put a lot of hard work into it, and it's nice to see these events become so successful, coming out of COVID. I hope in that 210 you didn't count me in the Halloween dance, although I was there. And it was a great time. Mrs. Clinton was all dressed up, the whole team up there. They did a fantastic job. The kids were well behaved. They had a DJ in the gym, and it was all decorated nicely, really spectacular event. It's nice to see, the kids and the families out, post-COVID and getting back to some sense of normalcy. And thank you. You guys did a great job. Next, I'd like to bring up the Lions Club Peace poster contest. Is somebody going to? All right. And there's our Lions.
Thank you for having us tonight. Mr. Rydell, thanks for coming last night and giving
your insight on our school district and taking the tough questions from our community. But Marlboro Milton Lions Club is always about, we serve. That's our motto. And not only do we serve, but we want to keep our collaboration between our school district and our Lions Club. So we do the eye screenings, which last month we did 248 eye screenings down here at the elementary school with 39 referrals. We give quite a bit of money to our seniors graduating scholarships. And then our middle school, we've been doing the art contest, which this year's theme was Lead with Compassion. And we had 11 entrants, I think 7th and 8th graders could choose to participate. And so we want to present a certificate to the middle school. Mrs. Clinton, if you'll come up. And it's just a certificate of appreciation for allowing us to do the program. Thank you. So if you want to take a picture with us. Okay. Oh. And then our winner this year was this piece of artwork, and it's Jefferson Arias. If you'd come up, Jefferson. No, I'm not going to put you on the spot. You don't have to talk about your art, but we want to award you a certificate, and then we've got a little, maybe take the family out to dinner or something. It's up to you, but thank you very much. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. So now his artwork will go to our district convention this week and compete against all the other Lions Club within 20-0, which is Orange County, Dutchess County, Ulster County, Sullivan County is in 20-0. And District 20-0 is because we're outstanding. So that's all we have. Thank you. Okay.
Steve, I just wanted to thank you, and you mentioned last night, just for clarification, the Lions Club invited me to their meeting, and it was absolutely my pleasure to meet the members, and I just wanted to provide just some insight, probably not a mystery to anyone knowing the community, but I was really amazed at the number of individuals that were present for that meeting. It's a vibrant organization. I'm sure you're always looking for more members, but it is just a great group of individuals, and it was just absolutely my pleasure, and I'll come back anytime. Yeah, some of the questions were tough, but I think tough questions come from people that care, so I'll take that any day. So I really appreciated that opportunity to meet with you, and thanks for the invitation.
Great job, guys. Okay, with that, we'll get into the building condition survey. We have a presentation. From our architects at CS Arch.
Good evening. How's everybody tonight? We appreciate being here. We're going to give you the findings of the building conditions survey effort that was completed this past summer. And we're going to go through, we have a brief agenda. My name is Tom Ritzenthaler with CS Arch. I'm an executive principal, and with me I have Dion Miller, also from our office right here in Newburgh, right at the waterfront. We're going to go through the overview of the building conditions survey process, what it means, just so everyone understands why we do a building conditions survey. We're going to go through the survey findings. There are a lot of findings, but we'll try to be somewhat brief, but please feel free to ask questions during the presentation. We did identify costs by building for work that was identified as part of the building condition survey results, and then we did provide an overall cost estimate. So we'll go through all that with you. So starting from the beginning, of course, it takes a big team to do a building conditions survey, meeting the requirements of the state education department. Of course, the Marlboro Dukes are part of that process, so you're right there with us as we go through and survey the buildings. Of course, our team of individuals from CS Arch. We have Blake Engineering, who completed all the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing portions of the surveying, and then Passero Associates, who did all the surveying from the site and civil categories. So just to give you a little overview of the entire capital project process, you know, it's a very long process, and we've been through capital projects here in Marlboro for quite some time. We're kind of back at the beginning. So the building condition survey is that start of the assessment process, which really talks to what are the needs, what are the identified needs for future capital considerations within the district. So we're kind of going back to the beginning. We just wrapping up the current project, and so now we're back at the first part of the process and looking at what potentially is coming up in the future for capital expenditures. So I'm going to have Dion come up and really speak to the process and then take you through the findings. He led the team for the district in going through all of the buildings, and so with that, I'll hand it over. And
All right, good evening, everybody. Dion Miller, as Tom said, I'm a project architect with CS Arch. So I'm going to go over the BCS process to start. So the BCS, Building Condition Survey, is a requirement of the State Education Department. It's one of the components of the 1998 Rescue Regulations, or the Rebuilding Schools and Upholding Education Regulations, which is ultimately based on the Commissioner of Education regulations. These regulations require the boards of education to conduct periodic inspections and provide safety ratings for buildings and sites, develop a 5-year capital facilities plan, process and monitor building conditions, and establish comprehensive maintenance plans for buildings. And the intention of the BCS is to provide districts with all the detailed information necessary to properly plan and prioritize capital improvements and allow the state to properly plan the building aid reimbursement for the districts. So the BCS survey is an instrument that looks at everything from program spaces, site utilities, structure, interior spaces, plumbing, mechanical, accessibility, fire protection, indoor air quality, and whether or not buildings are certified by American Red Cross as emergency shelters. So previously, the BCS was done on a 5-year basis, every 5 years, the last one being 2015. Starting in 2020, State Education Department changed that process, and it's now staggered over a 5-year period. So 1/5 of the districts in the state would do their building condition survey every year. That way it doesn't overload State Education Department all in 1 year. So Marlboro's BCS happens to fall in the 2nd year of that 5-year process. But this format, if you want to look at the actual form, is available on the State Education Department website. Okay. What we do when we start the BCS is we look at the previous BCS from 2015, also any visual inspections that were performed by the district, and the visual inspections are like the BCS, but they don't require cost estimates. So we look at those from previous years. We also look at hazmat reports, building site studies, as-built from prior projects, and with our surveys, we establish building conditions and budget estimates, which you'll see in a few minutes. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we review this with the district's facilities committees, support services committees, finance, health and safety, and the Board of Ed, and the school community to review all our findings. So the BCS are really graded on a scale system for all the conditions. So excellent, satisfactory, unsatisfactory, non-conforming, or non-functioning, and critical failure. Only building systems or components that have been rated as unsatisfactory non-functioning, or critical failure, or have a useful life under 5 years will be in this presentation. Want to know that any health and safety categories or structural categories that are identified that are deemed unsatisfactory will actually will deem that building unsatisfactory based on NYSCD guidelines. Any health or safety or structural category that's mentioned to be non-functioning or critical failure will rate that building as poor. Fortunately, we don't have any non-functioning or critical failure issues at this district. So this is kind of hard to see, but we prepared a matrix here, and it's really a list on the left is the actual conditions, and I'll go through this. It's kind of hard to see, but on the conditions on the BCS, and on top is each of the school buildings. So these only show the health and safety categories and the structural categories that will determine whether or not the buildings are satisfactory or unsatisfactory. The yellow at the top, you see that all buildings are considered to be unsatisfactory. And by the way, we determine unsatisfactory is not an impact on the certificate of occupancy of the building. Doesn't mean the buildings are unsafe or are harmful to students. It's more of a guidance for SED or State Education Department to develop future projects. They want to make sure that any projects in the future are really addressing these unsatisfactory conditions and not avoiding them. So it's really prepares a list for them of unsatisfactory conditions that they want to make sure are on the docket for the remaining capital projects coming up. So you can see that there's a couple items that are in yellow in each of the schools, which ultimately cause the building itself to be unsatisfactory for all the buildings. You can go to the next one too. So we're going to go through the findings quickly of each school building. Again, these are only health and safety and structural that will ultimately cause the building to be unsatisfactory. And we provided a brief description of what needs to be done, what we're recommending, and a quick cost. So at the high school, we're recommending some minor masonry repairs near the athletics office, some ramp repairs, crack repairs, and nose ring replacements to some of the exterior steps. At the swimming pool, we're recommending some repairs to the etching and the pool surfacing. And then at a ventilation system, we're noting that a recommendation to add exhaust to the chemical storage in the science wing, which is required by the mechanical code. We are also recommending that the original plumbing fixtures in the building are beyond the end of their life and they be replaced. And we're also recommending that additional areas of coverage be added for emergency lighting throughout the building. At the middle school, various locations of masonry and stucco facade reconstruction repairs are recommended. You can see there's a photo on the right of some damaged stucco. We're recommending some parapet flashing work along with some roof work, which will be listed later on. Replacement and repairs to some building stairs along the east side of the building, which is the 9W elevation. Full replacement of the roof on the building, which is beyond the end of its life. Interior stairs we're recommending to bring up the handrails to the building code. The water system, the sanitary system, and stormwater system in the crawl space. All the piping is original, so it's over 80, 90 years old, beyond useful life, and is beginning to decay a little bit, so we're recommending that be replaced as well. Additionally, replace some of the original electrical panels, which are beyond the useful life, and repair some of the emergency lighting and add some in the basement and boiler room. At the elementary school, which is this building, recommended to replace the roofing on the original building. It's beyond its useful life, end of its useful life, and there's some minor leaks reported. Also some soffit repairs. There's some staining on the soffits you can see in that photo. Recommend replacement of the original hot water heaters, which are beyond the end of its useful life. And then replace the original exit lighting and emergency lighting, which is antiquated, also beyond its end of its life. Middle Hope is obviously a building that's not occupied currently by the district, but is an owned property, which is also a requirement of the BCS to do one of those buildings. So we're recommending repairs to masonry, cleaning, sub-masonry, and scraping and painting on the lintels on the exterior. Replacement of the roof system, including repairing some of the roof decking. And increase some of the roof drain piping sizes on the roof. They're undersized, and there's not enough to cover actually the roof. And replace the original hot water heaters, which are original and beyond the end of their life cycle. At the central office, various locations of water intrusion, recommending masonry and concrete facade reconstruction repairs. You can see on the picture there some failure to the brick on the outside of the facade. Exterior and step replacement recommended on the west side, which is along 9W, and the north side facing Milton Turnpike going down to the basement area. Then the full replacement of the roof there, which is beyond its useful life. Piping and ducted heating, cooling, and distribution. A lot of the piping and ductwork is either corroding, the insulation is falling off, or needs to be cleaned. So we're recommending either replacement or reinstallation of those components. And finally, the central storage building, recommended a full replacement of the metal roof system and drainage system to be on its useful life. You see it's a little bit damaged there. Replacement of the hot water heater, which is beyond its useful life, and replacement of the original electrical panels in the building. So we come up with a total estimate summary here of all the buildings and then district-wide. So based on what we said before, the buildings are all deemed unsatisfactory. And if it's one item that's health and safety on that category, in that list, it will impact ultimately the entire building. So we have listed here about $7.5 million in repairs and replacements for health and safety categories, which is kind of shown on the red in the first column next to the unsatisfactory. There are additional BCS items that aren't included, that aren't health and safety or structural. These things considered like our site work, paving, sidewalks, playgrounds, athletic fields, drainage, aren't necessarily considered health and safety or structural by SED. Things also like flooring and walls in the buildings, as well as doors, windows, lockers, bleachers aren't considered health and safety or structural. So we did take into account some of those conditions, but those aren't ultimately causing the building to be unsatisfactory. In the third column over is a list of those estimates. And finally, totaling them all out, we have about $15.778 million in replacements or repairs recommended for the BCS.
And I just want to remind the board and the community, these costs that are identified are costs in today's dollars, and they're also costs for construction only. So they don't have any kind of contingencies. They haven't been escalated to a certain point in the construction. They don't include things that are incidental to construction, and all of those things would be provided as a total project cost as the board would consider a project at some point in time, and when we had that information, we could develop the total project cost in that regard. So these are only, today's dollars, construction cost only, but those other things. So you're not seeing the whole picture here. So I just want you to be aware of it, so you don't get shocked when the number changes when you consider an improvement. We would have to add those costs to the total project cost for something that would be considered. Are there any questions by the board?
What percent would that increase the total project, roughly?
So it would depend on, the the phase-in of construction, escalation is usually the biggest hit, especially nowadays because we're in such a heavy volatile market. Incidental costs for projects like these typically run 20%, and then for normal contingencies and escalation, so you're probably looking at putting 30 or 35% thereabouts on top of these figures.
I do think it's essential to clarify that this presentation is a requirement from New York State Education Department. Doing the building condition survey, meeting with your safety team, or your health and wellness team, I apologize, and then a public presentation for the Board of Education. Notwithstanding the great work that your team has done in putting this together, it is to find all of the areas that could be in need of improvement or remediation. This is not at all any form of a proposal of a capital project should not be interpreted as such. This is fulfilling a requirement for New York State Education Department and in a comprehensive manner. So all of the aspects up there of the financial implications, that is if we went all in and corrected everything on that building condition survey that was highlighted in this report. Second piece, and I think this is important, at least this is important for me to say, when I walk around these buildings and they are absolutely beautiful and they are exceptionally well maintained, and then you see that it gets a label of unsatisfactory, just for perspective, if nothing else was wrong, if nothing else was cracked at the high school, the fact that there's some etching in our pool counts as a safety or health and safety component for the state ed report, thereby making that entire building unsatisfactory. So I just wanted to offer that as perspective, because when I hear unsatisfactory, I hear unacceptable. That should not be the connection that's drawn this evening.
That's absolutely correct, and I would also remind the board that in this cycle of building condition surveys, the State Education Department created a lot of newer categories. They basically added many of the categories that existed, and they tagged them with the health and safety or structural tag. So there were a lot more ways, essentially, for if anything were wrong within a building, for a district building to be rated unsatisfactory. So, and remember, if something, a system or a building component is within 5 years of its useful service life, even if it's performing adequately, it still has to be tagged as unsatisfactory. It's just the way that the State Education Department requires us to evaluate the buildings.
Of all the ones you've done since the new regulations come out, have you ever had a building that was above unsatisfactory?
If I ever had a district with all the buildings satisfactory?
No. Yes, has
Which
any
is-
district ever had?
I don't think I've ever done a district, maybe with a very few exceptions, that had every building rated satisfactory.
Thank you.
It's very difficult. It's just one little item can trigger, you have antiquated univentilators, and that's a health and safety system because it's a primary ventilation system. If they're beyond their useful service life, which most univentilators in the entire state of New York are, it's going to deem your building to be rated unsatisfactory. It does not mean the building is unsafe or unhealthy for students. It doesn't affect the certificate of occupancy for that building. There's no relationship between the two things. It's a tool that we use to make sure that districts, when they consider capital expenditures, are prioritizing those categories and those things that are on the list as unsatisfactory, and they're prioritizing those along with the other needs within the district.
I noticed in one of your slides there you had a roof replacement for $1.9 million. Is that a roof that cannot be repaired?
That would be a roof that would be beyond its service life and wouldn't be repairable. There are alternate roofing systems, like coating systems, that would maybe be a little bit more economical, but again, you're still leaving the primary roof system in place, and generally that's not considered a good practice. And a lot of times it would also depend on you're having a lot of problems with some of these roofs with leaking, and it starts to affect other systems within the building, especially structural systems. I'm never in favor of leaving an existing roof system in place. It's kind of hard to say that that's an acceptable substrate for a new system. Even though there are new coating systems that you can get a 20-year warranty with, I've had some projects where it's gone quite well, and I've had other projects where it's been a complete disaster with those systems. So usually we recommend removal of that existing system, especially if it's abatement, to get all of the hazardous materials out of the building, put a new roof system in place. It'll meet the current energy code as well, which now has been increased, as hopefully everybody knows, to a minimum of 30, an R value of 30, so more energy efficient for the building, hopefully saving money on the utility lines as well.
Can you just describe the etching issue in the pool? As someone who works in pools, I just want to understand what you found.
So part of the BCS, obviously, is a lot of input from the district. So we did a lot of input from Larry on this one. Obviously, we can't go down into the pool and look at the etching in the pool, but Larry has noted to us, and it was something that's something we recognize as an item that ultimately is something that would be developed as an upcoming need. Ultimately, an etching could turn into bigger holes and it could cause leaks and stuff like that. But obviously, we can't go down into the pool to see to the bottom of the pool, but we got to kind of take some liberties and have some input from the district on some items.
We didn't ask that the pool get drained.
Yeah.
Because that's a much bigger.
Yeah, we're getting our pool acid washed in about 2 weeks, and it's a $14,000 job. No, $4,500 job, not a $200,000. So a price tag like that without actually seeing the bottom of the pool is just a scary number when it doesn't seem to be coming from a place of actual knowing.
If I can just piggyback on what James said, I also noticed there were some water heaters in there that were $25,000 a piece. And as an accountant in public practice, I have several companies with large water heaters, and I can't think of a single one that was that high. Are there special specifications? Are they gold plated? Are lawyers installing it? What's going on?
So when we talk about water heaters, it's not just the actual heater itself. You got to think about piping, controls to that system. You have wiring. If there's a building management system, there's a lot of little parts and pieces that go into monitoring that. So obviously getting rid of a water heater, you have to disconnect all those little parts and pieces, and then a new one, you have to put it back and make sure it's online and working appropriately with how Larry wants to see it when he's looking at the building management system.
And they do tend to be much larger tanks than we have residentially. Obviously, we're not putting 40 or 50-gallon tanks into a school facility, and the controls aspect is if it's monitored by the BMS, a control point on a system could be believe it or not, $6,000 or $7,000, which is crazy, and that's controllers for either unit ventilators, any kind of equipment. Each of those points is a pretty significant cost.
Thank you both very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, I'd like to call upon Superintendent Rydell to present the ESSER Gear and American Rescue Plan grants.
So thank you again. This is going to be one presentation of many, or at least three, to cover the aspects that we're looking to make sure we provide our learning community when it comes to this funding and how we're really looking to make the wisest decisions not only for the immediate agendas or action plans that we're looking to implement, but also how can we get a return on investment. And I'll get into that in a few moments. Before I get into what we've used this funding for and where we're looking to go, just wanted to get some common language out there, because while I like acronyms because they're a shortcut to an end, they can get lost in translation. So I just want to make sure that we are all speaking at the same language. So ESSER and GEAR are going to be the two topics that we're going to be focused on. And there are multiple iterations of these. So ESSER and GEAR were both part of that initial stimulus package that came out from the federal government to the states, which then trickled to each school district. And so that all came from the CARES Act. Then you have the CURSA Act, which came later on in 2020, and what that did was provided another wave of funding for schools, the GEAR 2 and ESSER 2. Then you have the third version. That's where most people call it ARP, American Rescue Plan, and that yielded ESSER 3. All of that's not important. I just don't want to keep saying GEAR and ESSER and have anyone that's listening to this not know what that actually entails. So an important point to make sure that we're all keeping an eye on, and that is, I'll use the term obligate and liquidate, because that's what the state has used. So obligate means you have now entered into an agreement or have launched the process to purchase an item or service, entered into a contract, and liquidate meaning that you have paid for that. So the first deadline was actually, it just passed last week, and that's for ESSER 1 and GEAR 1. I put a check mark on this because that has already been earmarked. So that typically by school districts, they took all of the expenses that could be applied in the spring of 2020 when schools closed, and you put that into those. That way you could get that reimbursement or funding back into your revenue stream. The next liquidation point is next fall. So that's what we're focused on, and that's what we have left to really focus on to make sure we're using it in the most strategic manner possible. What do I mean by using it in the most strategic manner possible? One thing is, one doesn't want to, and we have as a district, the district has submitted the application to the state saying this is what our plans are, and those plans were approved. We are looking to revise those originally submitted plans because there are a couple of key components. First of all, things that were put into that original application, perhaps they ended up costing more than we put into our application. Okay, that's fine. You just have to adjust it to make sure you get that full reimbursement if that's the objective. The other thing is, perhaps you earmarked $50,000 for the purchase of smart boards, but you end up spending $48,000. Well, you don't want to leave that $2,000 out there. You want to reallocate that because it's use it or lose it. Come next October, if we haven't liquidated, we don't get that from the state. So that's why it's very important to be very mindful of all of the nickels and dimes, for lack of a better term, because those nickels and dimes add up to dollars. The other piece that you have to be mindful of is in ESSER 1 and GEAR 1, you were allowed to use the money as you needed to in order to keep your buildings operating, provide the services to the students, et cetera. And it did not have any concern about whether or not you were receiving aid on that. And that's a very important concept for a school district because aid is a revenue stream the following school year. So one of the things that's in our original plan are BOE services, for example. Well, if you have BOE services in GEAR 2 or ESSER 2, the following year you're not getting aid on those aidable services. And I hope that makes sense to the folks. So we are going to be taking those out of these applications because BOCES is required to report that to the state, and we're required to report, thereby taking it off the table as a revenue stream. And I'll give you an example. Let's just say your BOCES reimbursement rate is 70%, just to use a round number, and you spend $100,000 in contract services, software licenses, things that run through a COSER. The following year, you would get $70,000 in revenue. If you run it through these grants, you do not get that $70,000. So again, I hope that makes sense, but again, that's why this is one of 3 presentations, because I want to make sure we're all on the same page with where we are with things. So Mike, if we can go to the next slide. Just want to provide an overview of some expenditures that were used or took place over the past few years. So purchasing of smart boards for our classrooms and throughout our district. Unfortunately, there was a thought that if we got desktop barriers right across New York State, we all got excited. We can get every student back in school with some desktop barriers. And then the state and initially the county said, no, you can't. So unfortunately, that money was used for that. Across the state, we are not alone. Purchasing Chromebooks, desktop computers for each of our buildings, obviously the PPE that was required throughout districts in order to stay open and address the pandemic, salaries, assemblies, these are all items that were funded through either ESSER 1, ESSER 2, Gear 1, or Gear 2. We can go to the next slide. Similarly, some programs that were launched, where you have the swimming program that's taking place as we speak, recess equipment for 2 of our buildings, as well as some needed items for our buildings and grounds crew. And one of the reasons that is certainly an allowable expense, because if you can maintain your facilities, particularly if there's an event such as snow, et cetera, and keep your buildings open, that's what the state wanted to see in the allocation of funds. So here are some of the adjustments, and this is where the conversation continues. So the BOCES items that I was speaking about, those that took place last school year, for example, that's water under the bridge. We can't unring that bell. But those that are in this year's, we have not obviously closed the books. We've really just opened the books for this school year. So those will be removed and put into our general fund budget, and we'll be looking to exchange some of the items that are in our general fund budget over into those that we wouldn't get aid on. One of the things that I've spoken about is the Lou Interactive Playground. So we are working, just so the board is aware, on securing that. We've been trying to work with the company. I was on the phone with Southern Westchester, or the Lower Hudson BOCES today, because they're the only BOCES left with a open contract with the company that has the Lou. So if we can run it through that COSER, therein comes the aid the following year. So let's just say we were to spend $38,000 for the Lou and the software, we would in theory get the aid back as revenue the following year. So it's worth the effort to do that. If we can do that, then it won't make its way into our federal funding, because we wouldn't get aid on it. I just wanted to provide a real example that's real time. So another thing that we are looking to make some alterations to is when we're actually purchasing some of these Chromebooks. So the reason I want to explain some of these to folks, the reason why you want to be cautious about purchasing any one item in a huge quantity is that replacement cycle. So we just heard about our BCS, and then you hear the useful life. Well, that also applies to things such as Chromebooks. And in fact, there are times where there's a time frame where a Chromebook can't be updated anymore. So you put them on, let's just say, a 5-year replacement cycle. Well, if you purchase a tremendous amount because you can in any one year, know that in 5 years you have to make a similar purchase and a similar allocation. This funding, you saw where the liquidation dates fall. So that's not something you can plan for. So we are trying to be, Mike has a great plan we're going to push that out to the greatest extent possible, thereby being very strategic in what our future plans will be. We had some items that had to be looked at for consideration, removed from the capital project. We're looking at how can we integrate those that would not get building aid, such as some of the work that needs to be done in one of our classrooms at the high school that we're really excited about that program. How can that fit into this funding? And then we had our continuous improvement committee yesterday. I already spoke about that, so I won't continue on, but that will have far-reaching effects. How can we best prepare our students for what comes after high school? That comes into way of college preparation, college application process, career readiness, career awareness, and things of that nature. Student-centered learning, also providing our teachers with that time and compensating for them for their time in order to do that planning, launching these programs, do the mapping, and then the mapping includes things that aren't just what one would see in a traditional concept. It's not just about the academic areas. Mapping, having a K-12 map for character education, having a K-12 map for mental health education, those are all very important, and obviously the literacy component that we are working very hard to address and continue to improve, and then professional learning across our district. And if we can just go to the last slide, Mike. There, I'll open it up, and we have a good crowd tonight. I'll call it a good crowd. If there are any questions from the Board of Education, and if none, or after that, then I'll also turn it over to anyone that might be in the audience. No. I hope I didn't get too far into the weeds on it, but again, I want to make sure that we're all aware of these processes because we want to be as strategic as possible.
Mike, I think it's important that you've illustrated how a lot of this gets paid for, whether it's ESSER gear from the state, rescue plan from the federal, how you move the pieces around, what's aidable, what's not aidable, and you have to be very careful in how we structure these things and how we pay for them, because at X point in time when these funds run out, they either have to go away or become part of the budget. So it's really a very strategic puzzle you need to put together to make sure that we can acquire these things and continue to have them after the funding runs out. So I think that's a great job.
Yeah, absolutely. Much better. That was said a lot more concisely than I could have said it clearly. But yeah, it's basically the concept that I use when I try to explain what that strategy is if you're given 100,000 and you could turn it into 170,000, you would. If you have that opportunity to make that 170,000, wouldn't it be great to turn it into 220,000? So the 100,000, in theory, became more than 100,000, right? And therein lies opportunities to better provide the educational opportunities that our students deserve. So, but thank you. Is there any questions out there? No. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think by meaning good crowd, he didn't mean large, he meant well-behaved, so it's excellent. All right, next we'd like to open up public comment on agenda items. Each speaker shall state their name and town of residence. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. Comments should be kept as brief as possible and relate to school matters. The board will consider your comment and refer such to the appropriate office. Is there anyone? Mark?
I just had a quick question about the CSR presentation. Is this district required to do some of those, all of them, or do you pick what to do?
So, I apologize. So it would depend. So on the items that are on our BCS, there is not one item that is required for us to do. That's why I wanted to clarify what the health and safety piece came in, because we had collectively as an administrative team, we had objections to that designation, even though we know that it's not CS Arch designating it. Right. We just wanted it on record that we objected to the fact that there are, for lack of a better term, some staining on the bottom of the pool, and that determines that it's a safety issue. So the short answer is no, there's nothing that is required. This is all part of the process to make sure that school districts are having regularly intervaled experts coming into their buildings to look for any safety concerns, any structural concerns, et cetera. And then there is a process where it has to be reported to the state to make sure there is compliance. then you then take it to the next level. Those individuals coming in will look to see how does this fit into a capital project, and I think that's how that ended, right? That's where they brought up the financial piece of that. It's really just about trying to educate all of us of what would this cost.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, being none, on to the consent agenda. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approves the contracts, agreements, and reports as presented, personnel recommendations, official Board of Education meetings of 10/20/22, MOA of the Secretarial Unit, financial reports for July and August 2022, CSE, CPSE reports, curriculum equipment disposition, and SECRA? And
That's not on there.
okay, remove that last one. Disregard that last one. Okay. May I have a motion? James, second. Joanne? Any discussion on the matter?
I have a question.
Joanne?
With the equipment disposal, I noticed that they're all like software, Robin. I said the equipment that's being, that we're getting rid of, it's all software?
No, it's teacher manuals, books, things like that.
Okay. So would they be useful, like, for the Y program, the after-school Y program? Would they be interested in them?
I don't think so. It's more a skill and drill kind of program.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
the idea, though.
Thanks.
I'd rather just expand upon that, just for the transparency piece. There were items purchased for literacy program that was not ultimately instituted. So there are some school districts that are currently using that particular series, and so we would look to provide an opportunity for those school districts to utilize that material.
I think that's a good idea. Thank you.
Any others? Okay, let's call the vote. Faith?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Trish?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, accept and approve the Office of the State Controller's Corrective Action Plan for Technology User Accounts as presented. May I have a second? James and Joanne. Any discussion? Okay, we'll call the vote. Frank?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Faith?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
Trish?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, moving right along. Any new business? Okay, any old business? No old business? Okay, being none, any other items? James?
I just wanted to thank the ENL department for a wonderful game night. My family went and partook and cried when it was over and it was time to leave. So thank you, Mr. Rydell, and all of the people who made that possible. I hope the next event they have, more families take part, because it was just a great opportunity to get into the buildings in a no-stress atmosphere where you just got to play with your kids. So it was a lot of fun. They had more games than we had people, but there was just a lot to do, and it was a great, great atmosphere. So thank you.
It's great. October was filled with events. We also mentioned earlier the Halloween dance at the middle school was fantastic. The high school drama club hosted a haunted house, which was absolutely amazing. Unfortunately, there was a football game that was supposed to be that day, so we thought there'd be a lot more in terms of people there. But they did a magnificent job. And incidentally, tonight, tomorrow, and Saturday, the drama club at the high school is performing Selfie and Bad Auditions. You might want to get out there to see that. We've got a new advisor this year and a great team, and I think you'll enjoy that. And November is also filled with a ton of events. Please take a look at the school calendar. And of course, on Tuesday, don't forget to vote. Anything else? Okay.
2
One more-
days off next week for students.
I'm sorry?
There's 2 days off for students next week. Usually, Mr. Rydell makes sure to note that often so that parents don't forget.
When do the parents get the days off? Never mind. Okay, the second time, let's, one more time, recognition of district residents. Each speaker shall state their name, town of residence. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. Comments should be kept as brief as possible and relate to school matters. The board will consider your comment and refer such to the appropriate office. Mr. Jennison.
Once again, Steve Jennison, Marlboro Milton Lions Club. I didn't want to take away from the art contest, but the Marlboro Milton Lions Club is going to be hosting seniors, Thanksgiving for seniors again this year on November 21st. I think we did 265 meals last year, and reached out to Mr. Rydell's office. Hopefully we have some Thanksgiving Day cards to give out to our seniors. It just sparks a smile on their face when they see them. So our plan this year is at 12 o'clock for our seniors group. We're going to serve the seniors Thanksgiving dinner. And then after that, we'll deliver meals to Jenny's Gardens and to Milton Harvest. And then we will also deliver meals to anybody else who signs up. And then there'll also be meals for pickup. If I could send it to you through your office, we did get it disseminated through the school district for any of our children that have grandparents that would like to participate. We would love to have a Thanksgiving meal, and we're doing it on the 21st. We felt we did it a little earlier last year. We want to do it the week of Thanksgiving because for those of us who do have families, and we have our traditional dinner on Thursday, but we have a lot of seniors that don't have families. So we wanted to get it as close as possible. And like any other event, the Marlboro Milton Lions Club, we love extra help. So if you'd like to come, if you'd like to serve our seniors, if you'd like to deliver, come at 11, give me a call. Thank you. Presbyterian Church on the 21st of November, 11 o'clock. Give me a call.
And how old do you have to be a senior?
Mike, you qualify.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve, and to the Lions for the outstanding community work that you guys do. It's a tremendous resource, and we're lucky to have you.
And Steve, I know I expressed this to you, but I just want to repeat it just for your consideration. You see this outstanding young man, Brett, up here. We have a lot of outstanding people just like Brett. If you have an opportunity and a need for our students to get involved, we will figure out a way to make that happen. I'm not volunteering Brett, but I think he would be one of those that would volunteer just from what I've gotten to know him. But we'll make that happen. Our students get a lot out of those opportunities, and we're looking to provide more of them. So just something to consider.
She's already got an idea for the next one.
She just said it would be seniors serving seniors. There's our marketing right there. It's beautiful.
Okay, so once again, I'd like to thank Mrs. Thomas and Ms. Amadeo for hosting the meeting tonight. And lastly, resolve that the Board of Education adjourn the workshop meeting. May I have a second? You all want to stay? Okay, James and Trish. Anybody opposed? No. So moved. Thank you, everybody.